So welcome back, everybody. This is Night Flight, and today Jerry Marzinsky is back, and my annoying cat. And yeah, we are going to talk about mental health, of course. What is the current situation? And I think it will be a very interesting talk. So, Jerry, welcome back.
Good to be
Long
back,
time
Susan.
no see.
Yeah, I've been out there slugging away.
Yeah, I
And
see you all the time. Everybody is interviewing Jerry.
well, I'm getting a lot of them. It, it, and I'm slamming the mental health system. I mean, it's a joke. The Western mental health system is a total joke. It's a drug-infused merry-go-round, and it's nobody's being cured. And the drug companies and the psychiatrists are making a fortune. You know,
Mhm.
and here they keep. Matter of fact, I looked it up this morning. You know, uh, on the internet, like what causes schizophrenia? So here, WebMD is saying uh, it's genetic. You know, that's been ruled out long ago. They're still printing this garbage. And one of the big hospitals was saying, Cleveland Clinic was saying, oh, it's a biochemical brain imbalance. That's been disproven long ago too. That was made up by Eli Lilly back in the 70s when they came out with Prozac because they didn't have uh, any idea what was causing mental illness. So they just made it up out of thin air. They go, oh, well, this drug affects the body, so it must be a chemical imbalance. And then they ran with it. They knew it was a lie at the time. And they ran with it anyway. They published it in all the documents. You pull up any of these antipsychotic medicines and it'll go, it is believed that there's a chemical balance in the brain. You know, I, from the very first start when I was working in the big state psychiatric hospital, I saw that before psychiatrists prescribed any medications, they never did any lab tests to see what brain chemicals were out of balance or by how much. So I asked one about it. I said, how do you know what the baseline is? How do you know which chemicals are out of balance by how much? I never see you guys give lab tests. You don't give any EEG, AKG. You don't give any kind of test. How do you know what's going on? Oh, we trust the chemical we trust the biochemical companies. They know what's going on. They print all the graphs and stuff. They're just, it's like letting the fox in the hen house. It's like no questions asked. The truth is, there is no chemical brain imbalance. They haven't found one. They disproved that a long time ago, and they're still publishing this garbage. They don't even know what the chemical balance of the brain should be. They have no idea, let alone which chemicals are out of balance. There's like, what, 23 neurotransmitters in the brain? They have no idea what the balance of any of those are or what they should be. It's a complete fabrication.
Who is funding the universities?
Big Pharma is funding the university. That's who funding it. And that was taken over. The universities and the medical system were taken over by the, wasn't the Rothschilds. It was, who was it? It was
Rockefeller.
Rockefellers and the Carnegie Foundation back in
Yeah.
1910.
Yeah.
They with the Flexner report, what they did is they pretty much paid off Congress with their lobbyists. I mean, they're rich, and they
Mm.
pushed through this Flexner report that said that medical schools would not be allowed to produce doctors unless they taught a pharmacological.
And who
Uh,
said yes to that?
well, they did. You know,
Yeah, okay, but when out of the blue a group comes up and says, well, guys, if you do not do that, what is benefiting Standard Oil,
yeah,
then
because they were
there
producing
has
some of
to
these
be
chemicals.
some type of process, and I would assume also some type of legislation.
Yes, and they
So,
paid off the legislators. That's what happened, like they always do, like they do right now. So this Flexner report was pushed through Congress by Rockefeller in 1910. The Carnegie Foundation and the Rockefeller Group sponsored the infamous Flexner report, which shut down any medical school teaching subjects outside of mainstream pharmacology. The edict was so powerful that only a few medical schools survived, such as Johns Hopkins and McGill and a handful of others connected with these groups. They were the only schools who could legally license doctors. Doctors who practice any method outside of pharmacology were threatened with the loss of their license. So that meant, naturopaths, Tesla's electrical energies type curing methods, acupuncture, any of that. So they did the same thing they always do. They paid off the Congress to push through their laws.
Yeah.
See,
it has been going on since
it's been going on for a long time.
Yeah, nothing has changed.
Nothing has changed, and they're doing the same thing right now.
Mm-hmm. So what I hear is you have no hope that there will be some progress in psychiatry.
Not in my lifetime, I don't think. Now what I did, I was invited to a Romania to speak in Romania to supposedly some psychiatrists, but I've avoided them like the plague my entire career, because they're so brainwashed. They, since the pharmaceutical companies have taken over the universities print pretty much what they want them to print. They'll fund these studies for these outcomes to be what they want to become.
Yeah.
What they were shocked when some of the people doing autopsies on schizophrenics found that their brains were shrunk like walnuts. So they published that. I don't know how they got that out, but they published it, and they were pointing to these antipsychotic drugs, the phenothiazines. Okay, when psychiatry, the psychiatric mafia and Big Pharma heard about that, they go, no, it's not our drugs. It's the schizophrenia that's doing this. The schizophrenia. So they started feeding that antipsychotic drugs to rats and mice and monkeys. The same thing happened. These are some of the most dangerous drugs in use in medicine today. And I've never, ever seen a psychiatrist mention anything about that. When they get these neuroleptic symptoms where they shake or their tongue darts out like uncontrollable stuff like that, what they do is they give them cogentin to mask those symptoms, so that the destructive process of their peripheral and central nervous systems keep getting rotted out, but they're not feeling it because it's covered up by the cogentin. It's completely immoral. Do they know what they're doing? Do they care? I don't know. The ones that I worked with, they just like, okay, this is what we do. It's crazy. And then they had something called the Thorazine Shuffle when I was working at the the big psychiatric hospital I started at. There were 10,000 patients there when I started. These guys couldn't walk with a normal gait. They would have to shuffle. Their central nervous systems were shot. And you look about the effectiveness of it. Right now, the Western mental health system has more psychiatric drugs available to it than ever before in the history of mankind. I mean, they're flooded with that crap. Everybody's got, you go into a psychiatrist's office, you're going to come out with some diagnosis and some medicine.
Yeah, I mean, Jerry, if you do not have at least a syndrome, and I mean, that is the funny word they always use when they have absolutely no idea what's going on. So if you not at least have a syndrome, you are not hip. You do not fit in this society.
It's nuts. And some of the syndromes, what they have mathematics disorder. They've got, I have a list of them somewhere. I don't know if
I think this mathematics disorder is called laziness.
Listen to this. This is some of the diagnoses they have right now in their latest DSM. Mathematics disorder, caffeine intoxication disorder, sibling relational disorder. You know, these are kids that are fighting with each other. You know, sexual orientation disturbance, homosexuality. Now get this one, Florence syndrome. This is
What?
called
Say again.
Florence syndrome. You know, like
Florence?
this Florence, like the city of Florence.
What's wrong with Florence?
There's nothing wrong with Florence. There's something wrong with the people who are doing this. Okay,
Yeah,
this is in their.
but what is that supposed to be,
Okay, I'll
Florence?
tell you what it is. It's being overwhelmed by beauty, such as in Florence, Italy, fainting and dizziness. They treat it with antidepressants. This is in their DSM, their Bible, the psychiatric Bible.
Oh
You
my
know,
goodness,
this,
that is, you know, a very normal human emotion that you can be a tad bit
yeah,
overwhelmed by
yeah,
beauty. It can happen in nature. It
right.
can,
They call
you
the normal word for it would be cultural shock, but no, they got it as a disorder. Now it's a disorder. All of those DSM categories are totally made up. There's not one medical test that will prove any of them. Zero, none.
okay, so I got it. So Florence is not a syndrome. It's a little bit more severe. So it's a disorder.
Yeah, the people who made this up are a little bit more severe, but that's not the only one. They got Paris syndrome. Well, get this. Mostly affects Japanese who visit France. Symptoms include depression, anxiety, feelings of persecution.
Feelings of persecution.
Feelings of persecution. They've identified this. I mean, again, it would be called cultural shock under normal terms. You know, so
Have you ever experienced a cultural shock?
I don't know. I've been a lot of places. Maybe working in the state hospital. That was the closest I've got to it. And in the state prison, those two. When I started digging through the heads of the criminally insane there, it was
Mhm.
yeah, I was shocked.
Yeah.
But you look at the,
I have experienced cultural shocks. I
where
have
at?
Africa, um, Thailand, yeah, a couple of places. And I was invited with my husband, and we went to a private home. And the guy who invited us, he was working at the bar in the hotel. So, stupid me, I thought it was a good idea to bring a bottle of champagne. Only problem is they had no fridge. They had two very, very tiny houses, not houses, rooms, and they had two kids, and they had cooked for us, and the food was great. There was nothing wrong with it. And yeah, toilet outside for the entire compound, and no running water.
Mm,
Yeah. Yeah. And when you spend an evening like that, then you become very, very aware what you actually have.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I've never been anywhere that bad. Mexico's, you know, they've got running water, but you can't drink it. We get
Mhm.
sick. The Mexicans can drink it. We
Mhm.
can't.
Yeah.
You know, they're
Yeah.
immune to all the bugs and stuff in it.
Yeah, I know in Tunisia, what they do, they start feeding the infants, you know, with a teaspoon, the water that comes out of faucet. So after a while, yeah, they have no problem with the water. And but if you go there and just drink water everywhere, that's a bad idea.
Yeah, I've experienced that in Mexico a few times. You know,
Mhm.
even the ice cubes, because you know you go there and you have a Coke or something like that, but then they put the ice cubes in made of ice from their water.
Yeah,
And that'll,
and with
that,
ice cubes, I never had a problem, I have to say. Never, ever. And I drank all over the world drinks and water or whatever with ice cubes. Never had a
yeah, well, so much for cultural shock there. You know, yeah. So I don't know, that's crazy. But, you know, we're talking about how many psychiatric drugs are flooding the market right now. I mean,
problem.
it's at historic records. Now let's look at what good that's done in between 1999 and, well, over 46,000 Americans killed themselves last year. It's closer to 50,000 now. Suicide. You know, that's as many as who died in Vietnam. In the whole 10 years the US was there. This is year after year after year after year. Close to 50,000 Americans are killing themselves. Between 1999 and 2019, the suicide rate increased 33%. This is with all their toxic psychiatric drugs that they're feeding
Yeah,
everybody.
no wonder that you need hardcore immigration.
Yeah, no wonder nobody's protesting over here. They're all drugged up. You ask why? Yeah, they're all taking something. They're all
If the
drugged out.
population is
It's all
thinning out
drugged up.
that badly.
Yeah, they're dishing them out over here. You know, you go to the pharmacy and people are they're taking these things and they're feeding them the kids now. So, you know, between 1999 and 2019, the suicide rate increased 33%. You know, schizophrenics suicide at a rate of 3 to 5% above the general population. You know, psychiatrists, the high priest of Western mental health, have a suicide rate of 3 to 5% higher than most other doctors. So they're suiciding at the same rate as their most severe, seriously mentally ill patients. So what does that tell you?
Yeah, karma is a bitch.
I never thought of it in those terms.
Okay, so I recently sent you a video. I don't know if you had a chance to look at it. It was about a psychiatrist in Arkansas
Oh
who
yeah,
was,
I took a look at it. So he was
yeah, who
sexually?
was caught with the hands in the cookie jar,
Yeah.
and he basically medically kidnapped hundreds of people. NBC had a report about that. And so these people actually didn't need to be in that facility, but he kept them there. And not only that, he kept them at the highest level of severity. And now Medicaid is a little bit miffed because they had to pay for their stay there and for the drugs, of course, and for everything. And it,
So
in
he was
many,
just
many
he was just
cases, it
holding them
wasn't
there.
necessary at all. What?
He was just holding them there.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, you know what I've
NBC interviewed one lady that was held there for a couple of months, and she said that the entire time she was trying to tell him that she does not belong there, and
forget it.
but he kept everybody
Go
locked.
ahead. Try to tell a psychiatrist you don't belong in one of their. Go ahead, give it a try and film it. I think that makes some good. That makes some good film. Yeah, give it. Yeah, just try that. Watch what happens.
Yeah,
I'll determine when you go. You know, I'll determine when you're sane enough to go. What they do is they wait till their insurance runs out and then they kick them out. You know,
yeah.
they'll keep them 2 weeks. And so it's this big merry-go-round. I've watched it over and over again. So these drugs, the side effects are so awful that the people won't stay on those drugs. So they put them on those drugs, they release them, they go, okay, you go to your mental health center, you know, they don't want to go to the mental health center to pick those things up. They don't want to take them in the first place. So they go off, they get psychotic, they go back to the emergency room. The emergency room fills them full of meds, send them back out again, and sends them to the psych hospital. They get loaded up again, and it just goes round and round and round, each time fleecing the government and the taxpayers and the insurance companies of tens of thousands of dollars. And it just goes forever. Nobody's being cured. Nobody's getting better. It's just, they're just fleecing. And then they complain about how high the insurance premiums are in the US. I mean, it's just this big vacuum cleaner just sucking the money out, and nobody's getting better. Nobody's being cured. Those drugs don't cure anything. All they do is just tamp down the behavior. They turn these people into semi-zombies so they don't cause any trouble. The voices don't even go away in most cases. They just get less. They're not as strong because the guy's worked out. He's like, you know, they can't think straight. They can't see straight. They feel awful. The side effects are rotten. You know, I remember doing a test on that in the psych hospital when back in the 70s. The only thing we had back then was their drugs. You know, so I'm thinking, why do they keep going off their drugs? You know, if they know they're going to get psychotic, why do they keep going off their drugs? So I did this experiment. Every single one that went off their drugs, and when they put them back on again, I'd bring them into my office and I'd say, why did you go off your drugs? The standard reply was, because of the awful side effects. So I'd say, what's worse? Being totally floridly psychotic, out of your mind, you know, having demons chasing you and hallucinations and paranoia and ghosts crawling in your windows and monsters coming out of the wall? What's worse, the side effects or that? So I would print out all the symptoms of paranoid schizophrenia out of the DSM, you know? And then I'd say, what were the worst side effects you'd experience? Because they didn't all experience the same side effects. So they wrote down 4 or 5. You know, okay, you know, blurred vision, sexual dysfunction, you know, groggy, I couldn't think straight, you know, felt like syrup in my system. You know, the common ones. And they'd write those down, and then I'd give them the list of all the psychiatric, you know, symptoms, you know, the hallucinations, the monsters, all that stuff. I'd say, well, which one's worse? 100% of them picked that the psychiatric symptoms were worse. The paranoia, the monsters, the voices, the hallucinations, the, you know, all that hellish stuff was worse. You know, and then I'd ask them, well, then why'd you stop taking your medicines? You know what their answer was? Take a guess.
I haven't been to a doctor for 3 years.
Well, what do you think they answered when I asked them? Well, if those symptoms are so much worse than those side effects, why did you stop taking your meds? What do you think they said?
Yeah.
They said, I don't know. Every single one of them. And there were like scores of them, like 50, 75, 100. It went on for 3 years. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. And I couldn't figure out why the psych patients were also beating up the psychiatrists at a rate higher than anybody else on the staff of the hospital. Those guys were being popped almost regularly. Some psych patient would take off and just knock them silly. You know, that wasn't happening to the psych nurses. It wasn't happening to regular nurses. It wasn't happening to psychologists or counselors. It was happening to psychiatrists. And that was odd. I couldn't figure out why. Last year I was at the psych hospital. One gal went off her meds. And if you go off your meds 3 times, they would discharge you. So she was about to be discharged. So mom got hold of this information. She called me. She was begging me, don't do this. I can't deal with her. I can't handle her. I'll come up there. We'll talk to her. So I brought her into the mother came in one Friday afternoon, brought her into my office with the mother. And both of us are asking the patient, why did you go off your meds a 3rd time when you knew you were going to be discharged from the program? So she was in the cosmetology program. She was about to get a license. She went off her meds, sabotaged that. And we're both asking her, why did you do this? Why? She goes, you won't believe me. I said, well, try me. I've heard a lot of weird stuff since I've been working here. I don't think you're going to say anything that shocks me. Try me.
Mm.
So she goes, the voices told me that I was being poisoned by the medications and that the psychiatrist was poisoning me. That, it clicked in my head right away. That's why the psychiatrists are being popped at such a rate. The voices are telling them that they're being poisoned, and they're pointing to the symptoms of the antipsychotic drug, the side effects, the rotten side effects, and they are being poisoned. Those are toxic side effects due to those medications. Those medications are toxic, and the voices are taking advantage of that. Yeah, you're being poisoned. Look at these side effects. That's why you're feeling bad. They're poisoning. That explained a lot of things.
Yeah, on the other hand, the voices, or shall we say the entities that are behind the voices, they know, of course, that they cannot come through with those pills. Yeah.
Well, they
So
come
there
through,
is,
but it's like dampened. It's like turning down the attenuation. They can't come through as strong. They don't have
mhm,
the power. They're weaker, and they come through somewhat less, but it doesn't get rid of them.
yeah. Yeah. So I just wanted to say it is true what they say, but
It
it
is.
is at the same time also self-serving. Yeah, because that way, when they have convinced somebody to go off the drugs, that is then, yeah, they have a field day. Yeah, they can
Yeah,
drive that person
that's
crazy again.
that's exactly right.
And,
They don't like the drugs. They don't like psychiatry because the drugs interfere. They're parasites. They're energetic parasites. They have to lower the person's frequency down to where they can suck the energy out of them.
hmm,
Okay. So you talk to schizophrenics, every time they're attacked, their energy level goes down. I did an experiment with that too. A 1 to 10 scale. How much energy do you have? I'd give them 1 to 10. How much energy do you have before the voices attack you? And how much energy do you have after they attack you? And it was statistically significant. I think we ran an analysis of variance on it. So there's a statistically significant change between how much energy they have before the voices attack and how much energy they have after they attack. You can ask any schizophrenic, how do you feel after the voices attack you? And they'll say, I'm drained. I don't have any energy. I can't do anything.
hmm,
And you
yeah,
ask them, well, did you use it? No, I was just laying in bed all night tossing and turning. But they say that they're so drained, they feel like they've been working out in the hot sun with a pickaxe all day. That's how drained they are. So these things are, and they don't just hit schizophrenics, they hit us all. You walk down the street and you have this horrible thought pop into your head to, like, slam this guy to cut you off on the road or something. It's like, it's not your thought. It's not your thought. You don't think that way. It doesn't fit in with the regular thought processes you have. That's them. They insert these thoughts into the person's mind. And we're all taught from the time we're kids, every thought that appears in your mind belongs to you. No, no, not that at all. Manuel Swedenborg back in the 1700s pointed out that no, thoughts don't come from your brain. They come from either heaven or hell. You know,
hmm,
he was one of the top scientists of his day. At,
hmm,
at
yeah,
the age of 57, he saw a vision of Christ, and it told him, it says, okay, stop all your scientific pursuits and start looking into spiritual matters. So he was given access to heaven and hell.
hmm.
He'd disappear for 3 days. He'd come back and write about it.
Yeah. Although I have to say, I see him very critical when it comes to afterlife and what he is proposing there, that an angel comes and picks you up, and if you do not want to have that angel, then it disappears, and then another angel comes and he grabs something and pulls it off your left eye, and then you can see. So he bought in to that entire false white light nonsense. So
Well,
I would caution against his advice in the afterlife.
Well, that's not exactly what he was saying. What he's saying is you end up
Oh
in the same
yes,
kind
that
of
is
place.
that channel of the left eye. They explained it, and I saw that just recently. They explained it in detail. Yeah.
Well, I've been reading his books for years. What he says is you end up in the same kind of people. So, you know, you hang around a certain kind of people. The gangsters hang around a certain kind of people. The students hang around a certain. You end up where you belong in that universe over there. So there's a place where you first enter, and then you're stripped down. So it's kind of like, okay, what's the most, and you head in that direction. You know,
Mhm.
so if you have more good stuff than bad stuff, then you move over in that way. It's like the Indians say, you know, you have two wolves. The one you feed the most is the one that's going to grow.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So he explained a long time ago that, and this is where there was a clinical psychologist called Wilson Van Dusen. He worked in Mendocino, California. He was the first one I've ever known of who started talking and asking questions of the schizophrenic voices. Now, what he was doing, he was trying to make friends with them to try to learn from them, you know, and they were very suspicious of him. He asked them all kinds of questions. You know, he would carry on conversations with them. Okay, and I've done that. You can talk to them. You know, they're 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 pretty much coherent. They can carry on a coherent conversation. And when you watch these mental patients, when they're hearing voices, it's like looking at somebody who's on a one, you can hear a telephone conversation, one side of it. You can't hear who they're talking to, but you can hear them responding to that, you know. And their arguments back and forth. Sometimes they get pretty heated. You know, there was one psychotic patient, it was a female, where she didn't want to leave the hospital grounds, and they were they were going, yeah, you got to leave, you got to leave, and she's arguing with them all the way out into the street to get away. You know, so they appear in their minds, and it sounds just like their thoughts. You know, you can't really tell the difference in most cases between your own thoughts and the thoughts that these things are putting into your mind. Yeah. So people normally assume it's me, but it's like me turning on me because they're turning on the person. You're no good. You're rotten. You're ugly. You're stupid. Nobody likes you. People are watching you. They're following you. They're going to hurt you. They're going to kill you. That kind of stuff. That generates that negative emotional energy that they feed off of. That's why they're constantly
That
battering you.
sounds almost like gang stalking.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Mhm.
That's what it is. They're gangsters. They're bullies. You know, they're nasty. They're very nasty. You know?
Mhm.
And that's what drives schizophrenia, those voices. If you get rid of those voices by any means, all the symptoms of schizophrenia disappear with them. The person
Mhm.
returns to normal. But
How was it?
huh?
Sorry, go ahead.
So those drugs don't do anything. These voices are energetic entities. They don't
Mhm.
belong in this third dimension. They're energy. Thoughts are energy. Memories are energy. Intuition is energy. So what psychiatry is doing, it's like, okay, if you look at a magnet, you get the magnetic field. You can't detect it, just like you can't detect the voices. Normally, like you wouldn't be able to see them or hear them, neither would I. But you get a bottle full of iron shavings and you put it on top of that magnetic field. Now you can see the outline of that magnetic field. You're not actually seeing the magnetic field, but you're seeing the outline of it. So
Mhm.
what psychiatry is doing is like dumping Thorazine on top of a magnetic field, you know, and surrounding the magnet in drugs, but it doesn't get rid of that magnetic field because those voices are energetic. Physical drugs are not going to get rid of them. It's like
Mhm.
pouring Thorazine on a magnet and expecting the magnetic field to disappear. Now that list of patterns that I wrote up, that's the iron filings for schizophrenia. All those patterns is what define schizophrenia and what the voices are. We got like 30 of them. The first one I discovered is they're consistently negative. They don't ever get positive. They don't ever say anything good. It's always consistently negative and awful stuff. So you
Mhm.
wonder, why aren't they random like all other hallucinations that are all over the place? Some are good, some are bad, some are neutral, and some are, they're all over the place. You know, that's what hallucinations do. No, the schizophrenic voices are running a consistent, persistent negative pattern. And it stays that way. It's predictable. You know, the second one is they're anti-religious. They go nuts when the person repeats the 23rd Psalm. The first patient I remember told me that. He said, when I repeat the 23rd Psalm, the voices react like worms thrown on a hot frying pan. So when I find something like that out back then, I would start asking all my other schizophrenic patients. There was no lack of them there. So I had access to hundreds of them. And they all said the same thing. If I try to read the Bible, the voices get louder. They don't want me going to church. If I go to church, they start screaming at me. So I did another test with churches. So most schizophrenics realize that these things are evil. There's something wrong with them. So they try to go to church. And what I found, if the voices were very weak and they went to church, the voices would disappear when they were in the church. If they were of moderate strength, they would get louder and try to block out what the preacher was saying so the person couldn't concentrate on it. If they were very strong, they would drive the person out of the church. He would get up and he would run out of that church. You know, and I've seen that. I've seen person get up and he just dodges, just runs out of the church. You know, so why would a hallucination be anti-religious? What would it care? You know? So here's all these patterns that are flying in the face, and there's like 30 of them flying in the face of what psychiatry is saying. You know, and if they're running patterns, they can't be hallucinations.
Yeah. And I would say that is in general a little bit sad that most of us do not really understand what is going on the energetic levels, how you
Right.
can have entity attachments and implants, energetic implants that you are not aware of. So on that front, there is, for all of us, a lot of homework to do.
Well, you know what just came out relatively recently, as far as the energetic implants you're talking about, is a fellow by the name of John Mace. He had no training in psychology or psychiatry or anything like that. I think he had some coursework in counseling. He was a ship captain. He drove those big freighter ships, but he was brilliant. He was a genius, and he was trying to figure out about these energetic implants. You know, he knew that what the regular counseling was doing didn't work. So he discovered something about the human. So we think it's mind, body, spirit, those three things that humans were composed of. He found that there was a fourth aspect. He called it a negative identity. So what this was like you were talking about, an energetic implant that goes in at the time of a trauma. And at the time of a trauma, that is it's created. And the person is in a bad shaped state of mind at the point that they create this. They're not even aware they created it. So after the trauma, it's going like, what did I do to get into this? Is it my fault? How do I get out of it? They're trying to survive. So they make some judgment about who they are based on that trauma. And it's usually not good, because if you're making a decision about yourself in a traumatic state of mind, it's not going to be a good decision, right? So you don't want to feel that feeling that they were feeling. And so the ego comes in and goes, oh, I'll handle that for you. It takes it and it just jams it into the subconscious mind. It wants to get out. It takes a lot of energy for it to get in, okay? And to hold it in. So every time somebody threatens that, like if you have somebody you hate, somebody who's caused you a trauma, type of person, anytime one of those comes around, it's going to threaten that identity. And that identity is going to start reacting. And every time it reacts, it gets stronger and stronger. And usually it's a fight or flight response. It's either you fight with that kind of person, or you get away from them. You disappear. Mace found a way to go in there and discreate those negative identities. And after they're discreated, the person still remembers them, but there's no emotional reaction. It's gone. It's out of their universe.
And how does he do that?
Well, what he did is he did a study of energy. and he found that energy flows from negative to positive. He found that your spirit is totally positive. I mean, that all spirits, in and of themselves, without this crap that we pick up during life, all these negative identities from all the traumas we all suffer, So energy moves from negative to positive. So positive attracts negative. So if you're a real positive person, you're going to attract negative things that happen to you. But he found that if you make the link, he found that the mind isn't what you think it is. It's the spirit. He said the only function of the mind is to create pictures of where you put your attention. He said everything that's attributed to the mind is actually the function of the spirit, the thinking, the rationalizing, the inferring, all the other stuff that, seeing, hearing, all that. It's all a function of the spirit. He said the only thing the mind does is create pictures, images of where you put your attention. Okay, so if I tell you, don't look at an apple, what do you see?
Yeah, don't think of an
Don't think of an apple. Yeah, don't think of an elephant. Okay, so your attention goes there. That's what you see. All right.
Yeah.
But what he found is that the mind in that form, so it's separate. I mean, it's not like the mind that psychologists or psychiatrists or Freud or anybody talks about. The thing about this is it works. It's functional. I mean, you can actually go in and do this. I mean, I'm using it in my, been using it in my practice for a year and a half, 2 years now, and it just cleans these things out. The person is totally different when they come out of it. So they find that, if they can form an image of something bad that happened, or a concept, or an organization, and concentrate and build an image of that, you have the spirit look at that image, okay, and concentrate on that image. So what happens is once that happens, it starts drawing all the negative energy out of that negative identity, and it turns it into that image. That image begins to grow, and sometimes it's as big as the planet, or something, all the way out to the moon. If they concentrate on it, that forms a conduit between the spirit and the mind. Okay, so the spirit will absorb that negative energy. Okay, takes it away from that negative identity, and that negative identity will vanish. Once the image disappears, that negative identity is gone. It's completely fascinating. I've been looking for something like that my entire life, and it works like a charm.
What is his name again?
It's called the Mace Energy Method.
Mace.
Now, John Mace wrote 2 books about it. One called Causism, because it gets at the cause of mental illness, unlike these drugs that these bozos are giving everybody. It actually gets in there and it removes the cause of the behavioral reaction. So you look at psychology and psychiatry, when it came to, psychology was supposed to mean the study of spirit, psyche. But when they started looking at spirit, it was too slippery. They couldn't weigh it, they couldn't see it. Nobody's ever found an idea in anybody's mind. There was nothing they could do with it. So they went, well, we'll just study behavior. So that's what they do. They study behavior. And psychiatry drugs down behavior. They don't believe in any kind of spirit either. So there is, the whole time, the 8 years I spent, 4 years of undergraduate, 4 years of graduate school, they didn't mention spirit at all. It was spiritually devoid. And we're human spirits. I mean, we are driven, your spirit leaves you, you die, and your body disintegrates. We're spirits. You can't have a therapy that doesn't deal with the spirit. And that's what these negative entities do. These evil spirits, these hallucinations, they call them. So since they can't deal with evil spirits and that kind of stuff. I mean, in the Bible, Jesus drove 23 times. He drove evil spirits out of people. And yet here's Christians today going, oh, I don't want to hear that. That's a fairy tale. That's 2,000 years old. We don't believe in that anymore. They're still around, and the schizophrenics are here to prove it. You get rid of those voices by any means, and all symptoms of schizophrenia vanish. but they won't even look at that. They don't want to hear it. It's like those monkeys with the see here, no here, kind of thing. They want nothing to do with it. They're not going to get at the cause of schizophrenia as long as they think it's a physical illness. It is not. It's an energetic, spiritual illness. It's got nothing to do with physical.
Yeah, I would say that, yeah, okay, this phenomena is not really new, but
No.
the last couple of years, what I observe is people in positions where they make decisions for a lot of other people, yeah, totally stupid. They have no idea what they are really talking about. They do not even have an idea what their so-called field of expertise is.
Yeah, they call them psychopaths.
And then when they talk, you sit there and you, oh no, please. And
I know the feeling. I know exactly.
It's very pronounced in politicians and also in other fields. And the thing that drives me really, really mad is why they are spewing their nonsense. They're so proud of themselves.
Yeah, they're egotistical maniacs. It's like me, and what I can get, and how much money I can make, and how much power and influence I have. I can go through these things very quickly. Now these are the patterns that the schizophrenic voices run, and if you look at them, they match exactly what the mainstream media and the politicians are doing right now. They're negative. They're anti-religious. They energetically drain their victims. They get louder when ignored. You can't ignore them. They just start screaming louder. They foster destructive behavior. They foster isolation. They want divisiveness. They maneuver for increased control over their victim. They gaslight. They manipulate perception. Let me say that one doesn't belong. They don't want others to know about their presence or what they're doing. They're consummate liars. They can't be trusted to keep any bargain they make. They consistently steer their victims away from anything that might generate peace or joy. Look what they're doing to the travel industry. They're trying to destroy it. They don't want people traveling. They don't want them to have freedom. They manipulate feeling. They short circuit reason. Let me see. They foster negative thoughts about the person's self and others. They destroy positive self-concept. They try to pull their victim away from consensual reality. They use confusion as a means of instilling negative suggestions. They're averse to anything positive or beautiful. Those are the iron filings for the schizophrenic voices. These are their traits. This is what they are. This is how they behave. The politicians are doing the same thing. I mean, they're taken over by these things. They're not for the people. They're not for the good. They're out for themselves and power and money. They could care less about the rest of us. Look at what's happening over here. It's a complete joke. I mean, this guy's falling down the steps of airplanes. He's falling off of stages. He can't string a friggin' sentence together. And here's the Democrats clapping for him. He's there, makes a speech, and he gets lost. He can't even find his way off stage. And the Democrats are clapping for him. Oh yeah, good speech, good speech. What is going on with these people? Yeah, what is happening? It's beyond human reason.
But I guess if the shoe were on the other foot, the Republicans would be clapping for him as well. So,
well, at least the Republicans.
If it were a Republican president,
they can find their way off the stage. They can string a sentence together.
Yeah,
they're not falling down the steps of airplanes.
Yeah, okay, but
there's some improvement there.
If it were reversed, yeah, then they would. People have a tendency to protect their belief systems.
Yes.
And to despise anything that might question their
That's
belief
exactly
system.
right. And
Yeah.
that's what psychiatrists are doing. That's exactly what they're doing. They got this belief system. The voices are hallucinations. They don't want to hear any evidence contrary to that, even though it's staring them in the face. I mean, I put out these lists all over the place. It's not like what they're doing. What they do is they take their stuff, and at first they started off blaming mothers for the voices. The mothers did something. That was obvious. I mean, mothers could see, hey, we didn't do anything. What are you talking about? So they moved it up to genetics. Oh, it's a genetic abnormality. Yeah, and they're still pushing that. They found that that wasn't the case. They could find no genetic link to schizophrenia at all. It's there's a correlation between people in the family also being schizophrenics. But if you look at it, the way the family is treated or the kids are treated by a schizophrenic mother, it generates that, you know? So they got that. So they moved it from that to genetics. How many people can check out genetics? They can't. Psychiatrists can't, doctors can't, we can't. So when the genetics was disproven, they moved it up to the biochemical imbalance stuff. You know, they got away with that for a decade or so, and then that was dispelled. So they have no idea what causes schizophrenia. None.
I know what it is. It's climate change.
Yeah, climate change. Yep. John Kerry. John Kerry, he's the one that did it. Friggin' what a clown that guy is.
So yeah, I mean, if everything fails, then blame it on climate change.
Yeah, and you look at how much they're making on this stuff. Global antipsychotic sales, and this is globally, have soared to $14.54 billion in 2021. It was expected to hit 15.5 billion in 2022. We're talking billions of dollars on these antipsychotic drugs that are rotting out people's peripheral nervous system, not curing anything, but merely just drugging and tamping these guys down. They're making that much money on these toxic drugs. You know, antidepressants. The market is expected to hit 15.98 billion by 2023. Those don't cure anything either. You know?
And you know, in countries, let's say, like Africa and certain countries in Asia and so on and so forth, that would be a luxury. Yeah, that type of medication. Let's call it, let's be friendly, we call it medication.
Well, you know, they're lucky. They're lucky it's a luxury
Yeah,
and they can't afford it.
And sometimes, and that is so bizarre, sometimes not having, you know, a full-blown medical system can be a blessing, actually. Yeah,
Well,
not in all cases, I know, but
right.
you will not find that nonsense on another continent. That's basically the Western world.
And that's great, because over here, look at in 2017, over 1 million kids in the US under the age of 6 were put on psychiatric drugs. You know, over 622,000 under the age of 5, over 80,000 on ADHD drugs, which is amphetamine. I mean, that lets these negative entities in like nothing else. It just opens the floodgates and goes, come on in. You know, over 38,000 kids under the age of 5 were put on antidepressants. Over 58,000 on antipsychotic drugs. These are the same drugs that destroy your brain, your peripheral nervous system. They're giving them to kids. Over 85,000 kids have been put on this crap. Over almost 400,000 were put on anti-anxiety drugs. You know, so
okay, we know that these drugs have a lot of side effects. But have you ever observed that? Sorry, carbonated water. But have you ever observed that some of them may increase the mental problem?
Well, I think they have a warning on the antidepressants now that says may increase suicidal ideation. There's a number of cases that came up in the news saying hey, these guys were on this stuff and they killed themselves and they killed other people. So matter of fact, there's one study that said that people get better without these antipsychotic drugs than they do with them.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, Jerry, what was it again? What drove you into this field of work? And as a counselor, now, what was your motivation?
Well, I was raised in a pretty dysfunctional family.
Mhm,
I come out of there going, who am I and what just happened to me and what's going on and how do I straighten out my own head? So I go, you know, when I took my first psychology course, I'm like, well, it looks like these guys may have some answers. After
mhm,
4 years later, after undergraduate school, what I saw is here we are. I was in Temple University. Here they are giving us these big books, memorize these books and spit it back to us. We didn't have any access to a clinical population to check out anything they were saying. Nothing.
mhm, mhm,
The only course that we could actually check out what they were saying was in experimental psychology, where you can go into a rat lab, you could foster these different schedules, and you can actually see them appear. But
mhm,
everything else you had to trust them for. And I wasn't very trusting of authority at that point.
mhm,
From where I came from, believe me, there was lots of things happened where I just did not trust authority at all. So the
mhm,
first thing I saw that in undergraduate psych was a paper they asked us to read, written by a clinical psychologist who said if two lunatics with the same delusion come at each other, so if two of them think they're Macron, one of them is going to have to change to somebody else. They
mhm,
can't be both Macron. And I'm
mhm,
thinking, why is that? They're both nuts. Who cares? Why would one of them have to change? That makes no sense to me. And there was no way to check it out. This guy was a clinical psychologist, wrote this paper with his degree and all this hotsy-totsy big words and the psychobabble and all that stuff. I just tucked it back in my memory. It was about 8 years later when I got to the psychiatric hospital. The big
mhm.
one, 10,000 patients. I was doing
Wow.
rounds on the second floor one day, and here was a new patient I didn't see before. And he was carrying on a conversation with his voice. So I'm like, okay, that's interesting. I haven't seen this guy. I don't know who he is. And I've kind of tried to creep up on him to see if I could hear what he was saying. So when I got close enough, he called me. So I just said, well, hey, I'm Jerry. I'm the psych for this unit. Haven't seen you before. What's your name? And he goes, I'm Jesus Christ. And I look at him and I go, no, you can't be Jesus Christ. I'm Jesus Christ. And I was waiting. So I'm like, what's he going to do? Did that guy who wrote the paper, is there going to
Mhm,
anything to it? And I'm waiting on like pins and needles for him. He looks up and he's like thinking about it. And then he looks me back and he goes, okay, we can both be Jesus Christ. And he strolls off. And I go, what else did they lie to me about? And then
yeah.
you look in the back of those psych books and you got these references. This guy is referencing this guy who's referencing this guy who's referencing this guy. And it just goes on forever. It's like, whoever gets referenced the most, that becomes reality. And I'm like, what's going on here? What's this stuff? So it was like thing after thing after thing. And then I saw what was happening, with uh, the the psychiatrists who were insisting that these voices were hallucinations. And I'd asked all the other staff. There were hundreds of staff at that hospital. All of them believed that the voices were hallucinations. None of them were curious about what the voices were telling these people. Not one of them. It was just me. I'm like, well, what are they telling them? I mean, if apparently the voices are affecting them in a negative way, because the ones who are listening to the voices the most are doing the most bizarre stuff. They're getting in the most trouble. So there's a correlation there. Why don't they want people to know what, why don't they want people asking what they are? So I started asking them and I started getting these patterns started coming out. Now, one
Mhm,
of them got upset. His voices didn't want me butting in and asking questions about them. So this one went to one of the psychiatrists and told him, hey, this psych's asking me questions about my voices and it's upsetting me. Next thing I know, I was pulled into that psychiatrist's office and being told, you will not do that. The voices are hallucinations. And what you're doing by asking them questions about the hallucinations is you're reinforcing the hallucinations and you're making them worse. I want you to stop it right now or else. That happened twice. They don't want to, they don't even want you asking questions about what the voices are. They want everybody believing they're hallucinations. They're teaching that in the universities. The big pharma is pushing that. So you see that in their drug advertisements for antipsychotics. It is believes that there's a chemical imbalance that produces these hallucinations. Yeah. Been totally disproven along with the genetic stuff. They're making billions of dollars on this garbage. That's why they don't want it to change. And the people who the MACE organization in Australia, where this was developed, they went to one of the universities and they demonstrated how well the system worked. And the university said, okay, we'll take it if you turn over the copyright to us. You know, the MACE guys went, help yours, you know,
and then it gets buried forever.
Then it gets buried forever, just like they have with the cancer treatments and the cars that run on water. So they went to the legislature. They showed the Australian legislature how well it worked. You know, they say, oh yeah, it worked, but it went no further than that. So it's got to come from the bottom up, just like this information I'm putting out. It's got to come from the bottom up because it's never going to come from the top down.
No.
You know, and in my lifetime, I'm not going to see psychiatry go, hey, we know what it is now. It's not going to happen. They're making too much money. They're making billions of dollars on this fraudulent crap that they're putting out. And they got the money to brainwash the entire population of the planet with this stuff. You know, you look at it. The psychiatrists are doing the same thing in Germany as they're doing in France, as they're doing in Britain. And Britain is even worse. You talk about a draconian mental health system. It's like what you were talking about. I mean, they would section these guys just at the, oh yeah, we're locking you up, you know, because we're psychiatrists and we have the power to do that. You know, there was I think it was in 1947, there was this guy speaking before the UN saying, well, we've taken over the church, we've taken over the universities, what was it, the ones that they were having a hard time with. So, you know, they were wanting to take over all these institutions and push this garbage on them. You know, I forgot what that was called, but you could see this guy up there saying, this is our plan. This is what we plan to do.
Okay. So, Jerry, believe it or not, our first hour is already gone.
Well, that went pretty quick.
Yeah, that was pretty quick. Yeah. So, yeah, guys, we see you next time and we will see the patrons on the other side.